Hi, welcome to the History Talks. I'm your host, Will. This is Sebastian. In this episode, we continue our series on ancient Rome, where we'll be discussing the reign of Augustus. In our last episode, we talked about how Augustus had defeated his rivals. So, Sebastian, what did Augustus do next?
Before being granted the title of Augustus, he had not only been a triumvir, but also a consul for 7 straight years, and for a time after defeating Mark Antony, he had appeared to be trying to restore the Republic, nominally giving control of provinces to the Senate through a system in which provinces ruled by proconsuls or ex-consuls were appointed by the Senate and approved by Augustus, while other provinces were ruled directly by him, namely the ones that had the bulk of the army.
Previously, the provinces had been ruled by a governor that served the consuls and the Senate. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So this was significant because it meant that Augustus had taken this role on directly.
Yeah. And what's interesting about the title of Augustus is that it was technically a religious title rather than a secular one. He had his name included, he had his name included in the Salian hymns. He took the title of Pontifex Maximus, and he had the Senate declare his name sacred for as long as he held office. He built a temple to Julius Caesar, and he even stylized himself as Imperator Caesar Divi Filius on Roman coinage, which means Commander Caesar, son of a divine one.
Wow, son of a divine one. That's quite a title.
Mm-hmm. That last time idol also reflects how he had tied himself to Julius Caesar. And in fact, histories of Augustus from this time almost exclusively refer to him as Caesar rather than Augustus or even Octavian.
Do you think the reason we call him Augustus now is because it would get confusing talking about two different people both named Caesar?
Yeah. Now, Augustus conquered further land in Gaul, reconquered land in Illyria, which is near modern-day Serbia, and Rome had conquered it previously but lost de facto control. And he successfully waged war against the Pannonians, the people who live in what is now Hungary. These two conflicts led to Augustus expanding the borders of Rome all the way up to the Danube River.
That is significant because not even Caesar was able to advance that far in those regions.
Yeah. Augustus also went to war against Parthia, in which he notably recovered several legionary standards which had been lost in wars prior. He also effectively made a client state out of Greater Armenia, a kingdom that covers what is now Armenia and northern Syria, by replacing its king with several puppets.
So he really expanded his empire in multiple directions.
Yeah. Now, some historians argue that he may have dropped the facade of not being a king when he had the Senate declare him Augustus and Princeps, the origin of the modern English prince, and a word that back then could probably best be translated as meaning first. This is also when he officially took on the title of Imperator. An important note on him being Princeps, or first, is that he wanted to be seen as the first citizen, as a further means of making him not recognized as a king, despite being given a civic crown. Also on the note of him being a citizen ruler, he had the title of Imperator only given for 10 years, and simply made the Senate renew it every 10 years. Even future emperors who were made Imperator for life would have a renewal ceremony every 10 years in imitation of Augustus.
Why do you think Augustus had the title be renewed every 10 years? Was it because Caesar was assassinated after being named dictator for life?
Yes, and in fact, dictator is an emergency title and thus a temporary title. In just the same, he wanted to draw on that idea of a temporary authority title, just simply that one that needs to be extended for a long period of time. Additionally, anytime he wanted to pass a new law, he would post it in the Senate for debate and critique, allowing him to further have the appearance of holding to Republican virtues and potentially gain some feedback, though it seems to me that he rarely implemented the actual feedback of the senators.
That's a little bit like how nowadays when a big corporation gives you a way to submit feedback, but they don't really seem to care or pay attention to what you say.
Right. Now, Augustus, for all of his strategic and political might, was rather sickly on a physical level, and he often fell ill. One such occasion was 23 BC, when Augustus thought he might die of his illness. And on what he thought was his deathbed, Augustus wanted to pass his political authority onto his general, Agrippa, while he gave documents related to his personal finance to his co-consul, Piso. All of this was a surprise to the Roman people, who thought he would name his nephew Marcello as heir. But instead, it helped to further legitimize the idea that him being imperator was different than him being a king due to him not pushing for heredity.
Interesting. How old was Augustus at this time?
40. Now, Augustus recovered, but in 22 BC, he refused to continue serving as consul, even though he was still imperator. This was a strange move, as it was technically under his authority as consul that he was able to interfere with the proconsuls. And the Roman people, the Roman plebeians, interpreted this as a power move on the power of the Senate against Augustus, that they were somehow blocking him from being a consul, and so they protested for them to hold the position open. They did so and made it so that only one consul was elected, and the other consulate was only open to Augustus, though he still didn't accept the title.
Even though the plebeians thought it was the Senate driving this decision, I get the feeling that it was actually something Augustus wanted rather than the Senate.
Yeah, the most likely reason for Augustus to not accept the title of consul was so that he could accept the title of proconsul, and his proconsulate would be Rome itself. And to replace the lost authority of the consul, Augustus instead took on the tribunicia potestas, or tribunal powers. Though he technically didn't have the title of tribune of the plebs, he had the power of said office that he had as a consul, including important powers like being able to interfere with the proconsuls and being able to call meetings of the Senate.
Yeah, I would say it does sound like Augustus was the one who was in control here.
Yeah. In 22 BC, there was a food shortage in Rome caused by a grain shortage, the cause of which is not clear. There was pressure for Augustus to also take the title of dictator in order to deal with the situation. However, he made a big public showing of him saying that he would rather be stabbed by a mob than accept the title of dictator, but then he accepted permanent responsibility over the cura nonnae, giving him direct legal authority over the Roman food supply.
That sounds a lot like a dictator without the title. And that concludes our episode on Augustus. Tune in to our next episode as we continue the reign of Augustus and our series on ancient Rome.